timing contractions seems like an easy topic or an easy thing to do, but it can be kind of complicated. And actually, when I teach it in my Lamaze class, sometimes I get these looks on people's faces like, what? Say what? What's going on? How do we do this? Now, the good news is there's an app for that. And I will link down below a couple of apps that I have found to be fairly easy to use in timing contractions. But I will, and I'm going to cover the apps at the end of the video, or talk a little bit about apps at the end of the video. Let's start actually how do you time them? What does it mean? So a lot of times you'll hear about, oh, my contractions are 5-1-5-1-1 or 5 minutes apart. So what that means to time a contraction is to start the timer. Say you had a little timer like a coach. Click. Start the timer when you start feeling a contraction. So contraction is your uterus contracting. And then keeping the timer on all the way until the end, noting that time. That's one number. From the start of a contraction to the end of a contraction. That's the length of the contraction. But if you kept that timer on until the start of the next contraction, that's your frequency. So 2 numbers when you talk about timing contractions are really important. Number 1, the length of the contraction. I think that one is the easiest one for people to understand. Sure, it's the easiest for me to understand when I learned the first time. So it's how long is it? The length of the contraction from the minute you start feeling it to when it is totally gone. That is contraction length. That's how long they're lasting. And in early labor, we can see this vary. Sometimes we'll see short contractions, 15 seconds long. And then once labor comes into a more predictable pattern, we'll start seeing the lengths of the contraction being pretty similar, like say 1 minute apart. Maybe the next one is like 1 minute and 3 seconds or something like that. So the length of the contraction is from the start of a contraction to the end of a contraction. Now, the second number when you talk about timing contraction is the one that I think throws people off sometimes, but it is how far are they apart from the start of one contraction to the start of a second contraction. So when you talk about my contractions are 5 minutes apart, that is what that means. That's from the start of one to the start of another one, how long that is. So if you can imagine your contractions being 5 minutes apart, lasting a minute, then you've got the start of a contraction, a 1 minute long contraction, and 4 minutes of rest before the next one starts. So as I've worked with couples in labor, I've noticed something that seems to happen a lot. And that is, if you're using a phone timer contraction app, you don't actually, when you're feeling the contraction, it's going to build from basically no sensation and then build up like a peak and then down. And a lot of people don't start their contraction timing until it starts really getting strong. So there's kind of like the beginning few seconds, I would say 5 to 15 seconds that are not timed, which is not a problem. But as you are looking at how long your contractions last, often you probably could add an extra 10 seconds or so that you're not getting from the very beginning. It's like you're shortchanging your contractions. So just know that, especially partners, maybe be aware that they start to say, oh, I think one might be coming, and okay, start the contraction now. Well, that contraction probably started at, I think one might be coming, right? So it might be a little bit longer. Also on the tail end, as they go, sometimes people will say, I think it's over. When it's not really over, it could still be kind of tapering off. So just be aware if you're timing contractions or the person that's helping someone time contractions, that you might have a little extra on the ends that could make those contractions actually longer than what the app says. So just a little tip. So it can be a little bit complicated, and thankfully there are apps that make this very easy. So again, I'm going to have some below, but what you do with an app is you have it open on your phone. When the contraction starts, there should be a button that you press to show start of the contraction. When the contraction is over, you press the button that says end of the contraction. Again, the next contraction start, the next contraction end. And then as you do that, it reports back on your length and your frequency. So it takes all of the sort of hard part out of it. One thing to note when you are looking for an app to time your contractions, test it out before you use it in labor. Some of them have settings on there where they're asking the strength of the contraction, and I've seen this go really wrong, especially when maybe a partner is timing, pressing that button and then ask for strength, where you're like, well, how strong was that one? And was that one stronger than the last one? And it can get super distracting and really annoying, and there is really not a lot of use to keeping that information in the app. So make sure that I really recommend not picking an app that requires that. Also, when the app runs, it's really going to suck down your battery, or it can. So maybe look at that when you practice timing contractions on your app, on how that works. And just make sure it's super easy and that it gives you a clear readout, so that it doesn't, it's not confusing in labor. So the other thing about timing contractions that I really recommend, I try to teach all my childbirth ed students this, my doula clients, is that having an app, even if you don't use an app, but I feel like this happens more. Sometimes you can become fixated on using the app to time your contractions, where every single contraction has to be, counted, that you have to time every single one. So for hours, labor, an average first time labor is like 18 hours. So if you are counting those, clicking on that button for hours, it gets really tedious. I really recommend timing them for half an hour, maybe even an hour, and then just putting that to rest and go about your business, do your coping, do anything that you, resting, all of the labor activities that you do during whichever phase of labor you're in, early or active, transition. Don't fixate on the app. You do not have to time every contraction. It's just good to get an idea of how far apart they are and how long they are. If they change, if it feels like, oh my gosh, they're coming a lot faster or they're a lot longer, okay, start timing them again to get the new picture. But it's with our phones and how we like to quantify and look at all the data, I think it's really hard to put the contraction timer away, but I really recommend it. And partners, this is something for you to really remember. Say time some, then say, I'm going to put this away until we see a change. This is a real time that your support team can get in there and keep you honest with putting the timer away so that you can just labor and not have to time them. So timing contractions are two things to remember: is the length of the contraction and the frequency. So length is start to finish, frequency is start of one to start to the start of the next one. Sometimes you'll hear the third number of how long this pattern has been going. So if your care provider, if your doctor or your midwife says, come in to the hospital, the birth center at 5:11, for example, that means 5 minutes apart, lasting a minute, and that pattern has been going on for an hour. So the third number would be, how long has this pattern been going on? And all of this is, it doesn't have to be an exact science. Also, if you're timing contractions and the app says you have a contraction that is, say, a minute long, and the next contraction is, say, 48 seconds long, and the next one is, say, a minute and 12 seconds long, those are minute-long contractions. Okay? It's about average. So if you have questions about timing contractions, please leave them below. I'm happy to talk contraction timing. Sometimes it can be confusing. Look down there in the comments for the reviews of the contraction timers that I was talking about. And if you are looking for more tips for partners, please